Welcome, everyone. We're excited to have you here. I'm Zoe, CEO here at Common Trust. We work with business owners who care about continuity to transition to employee ownership, and you are here at this month's session of Owners Session with RainTech. Just some quick background on us. We've worked with businesses as small as I think 9 employees. We've worked with businesses with 60,000 employees, all to transition to employee ownership. So what we're here to talk about today is a model that is really customizable that can fit smaller businesses, larger businesses, and why business owners choose to use that. I would say one of the things we've really learned through our work over the years with business owners choosing to transition to employee ownership is that it takes shape in really different ways. So, for some folks, it's a succession plan. For some folks, it's about independence and preserving culture. And sometimes, like our conversation today, it's really about how the company operates. So that's really the purpose of these sessions for you all to hear directly from business owners and employees at employee-owned businesses about the model, how it works in practice. There are two things that are unique about today's conversation that I'm excited about. One is we're going to be talking about employee ownership, not just as an exit strategy, but actually as an operating model. So this is something Andrew is going to be jumping into. And the second piece is to support that, we actually have an employee owner here, Jefferson, who's going to share the employee perspective about the model and what it looks like in practice. Um, so to get us kicked off, today we have Andrew, CEO and people person at RainTech, as well as Jefferson, who is RainTech's service delivery manager. Jefferson was actually elected by his fellow employee owners to serve on the company's board, so has a really unique perspective to share with everyone today. And I think what makes their story particularly exciting is that a lot of the practices that people typically associate with employee ownership, they've actually been doing these for years. So we're going to hear a lot about what that looks like in practice, the transition to employee ownership, and each of their perspectives through the process. I'm going to go through and I have some questions that I want to ask each of you. But for everyone here, this is a participatory conversation, so feel free to drop in questions as we go, and I will get us started. Andrew, let's start with you. Um, I'd love for you to do just a quick intro on yourself and the business, and then as we can see in the background, people period. Tell us what this is about.
Okay, got it. Well, first of all, I'm not one big into titles, but I do like the fact that CEO and people person is my title, and I actually don't really consider myself founder anymore. And if you think about it, this company is not what it was when I found it, literally in my garage. This company is now founded by everyone who is here in this moment, and it looks just night and day different, obviously, between when I started it and now. Yeah, that was 25 years ago, this last month or so. Yeah, we've completed this transition, whatever you want to call it. And I am so grateful and happy and proud to maintain this position. And I didn't really have any intention of changing my job per se. Though I'm also very happy to say that a big part of my job is now actually talking about this and doing exactly what we're here doing today. So I'm kind of excited that that's a neat thing that gets added to the things that I do here. But otherwise, just as you said, I have been sort of saying exit's a four-letter word, but I say that tongue in cheek. And obviously, there's a lot of people who are looking at an exit, and I do just like to tell people that, for me, I could have waited obviously until I retired to do this. And as I like to say, probably still would have won a popularity contest amongst my what would have been employees, obviously. But that would have required me to continue waking up every day and subscribing to a model that frankly just doesn't resonate anymore, which is what I call the extraction model, which is literally just extracting excess value from other people. And that just didn't resonate anymore. And so as soon as I realized that we had the wherewithal to make this happen, I said, well, then this is happening now. And that was a year ago. So in May, I think we announced it and we were done in March. So it took us a few months even just to find you guys, first of all, but a few months to even find employee ownership trust as a vehicle compared to some of the other alternatives. And yeah, now we're all wrapped up and we're up and running and everything's great.
So Andrew, the people period philosophy, we see it behind you on the scroll, that obviously predated the employee ownership transition. What is this philosophy? What does this mean to you?
Well, I was sitting here one day and either it came across my awareness or occurred to me this entire principle of people first. And I actually just sort of realized what a lie that really is. Because you actually can't compare the inherent, intrinsic, infinite worth and value of a human being to anything else. And if you are, I would suggest that you're actually probably not recognizing that inherent worth and value and almost certainly not actually putting people first. And when you go so far as to say even people before profits, then I think you've really sort of put, yourself out there and said, the opposite, in my opinion, because I don't think that these two things are comparable. And so I just decided it's people, period, and not people first.
And tell us a bit about like, I mean, it's literally on the wall behind you, but how do you take something that is a slogan, maybe on the wall for folks, and actually make it a practice that people, your employees like live and feel that philosophy?
It starts with our core values, which we came together as a team to create and to recognize and to understand and pull forward. And so those are growth, understanding, integrity, diversity, and empowerment. And then it extends to making sure that that principle is really in our awareness as we're making day-to-day decisions, as we're actually working through day-to-day operations, and particularly when we're dealing with challenging situations. That's when guide is, most important, and when we most need people remembering, these values. And so, as one of the leaders here, that's certainly my first question to anyone that walks into this office and says, "Oh man, I got this thing going on." Is like, well, how is this at the people level here? How is this as a person? How are you? And start to get job roles and titles and labels and identities sort of extracted from that a little bit and get it first and foremost down to sort of what's true. And what's true is that you've got two or more people in a situation that might be kind of challenging. And we need to remember to lean on our core values when we're in those situations and not fall into identity based, reactionary stuff, based on job roles and titles and, expectations and all that. And so when you start at a better foundation, then empowerment really leads to a lot more accountability because people are empowered to make choices and make decisions, and they know that there isn't a risk associated with that, and especially under an employee ownership model where now everyone is sort of truly tasked with owning fully their position, and they know that they get to innovate it and figure out new ways to do it, and how to make the whole thing better, faster, stronger, et cetera. And so, I basically turned another almost 30 people into highly motivated owners, who are just doing great work. And they were already doing great work before. I don't want to say that they weren't, but now, I don't know, maybe there's another pep in the step or something like that. I certainly enjoy walking around here and seeing a whole bunch of other people that own exactly as much of this company as I do now. And now maybe I don't feel quite like the imposter maybe that I did before. If that makes sense.
hmm Jefferson, I saw you laughing as he was saying pep in your step. I'd love to pull you in on this. First, can you introduce yourself and your role at the company? And then I'd love to hear your experience of this people period philosophy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the service delivery manager here. So if something is being fixed for a client, I'm involved in overseeing it in some way. So I manage that team specifically, and it really is the biggest team at RainTech. So I see a lot of how this philosophy plays out. There's just the most human capital dedicated to that, and that's where all of our efforts are going to serve our customers in a lot of ways too. So kind of end up with a little bit of a unique perspective there. Um, it's one of those things in IT where people are kind of afraid of help desks, either calling them or working on them. It can be kind of a really anxious position for a lot of people. They want to get into it and get out of it as fast as they can. And what we're hearing is the exact opposite, not just from our customers who are happy to call, but especially from the technicians. A good technician is really hard to keep hold of, if you want to put it that way, right? There's always opportunities to move around, and when people really love where they're at, the work they're doing, and how that's going, they stick around a lot longer. We've got a very, very long tenure here. We even have multi-decade people here. But at the end of the day, people see that there is a lot of value placed on their work, on their well-being, and especially on their creativity that you really wouldn't be able to have otherwise. When people have a certain ownership over these things, they have the opportunity to develop them a little bit more than they would otherwise. They have a much greater stake in it. You hear stories all the time about people where they'll take a lower pay, they'll take a worse position, all kinds of things that would be undesirable because they want to have a say in what they're doing and how it's done and to kind of leave their mark. We have the opportunity to treat our employees very well, bring them into those conversations, and they get to leave their mark. They get to develop all these really cool things. We ask a lot of our employees, we ask a lot of all of our partners, but they're very, very good at what they do, and they're motivated to learn and grow because they're benefiting, and we treat them well. You'd be amazed at how people are treated sometimes in IT. It boggles my mind. People just respond very, very well to this kind of model and this kind of culture.
Hmm. So tell us about when you came into the business and heard this, people period philosophy. At what point did you realize this was, not just a slogan, but it was really like what the company was living? Was there like a particular moment for you?
Mm. I don't know if it was a particular moment as much as it just kind of it just kept happening. You come into a place and you hear, if you see that slogan, people period, you hear people period. My knee-jerk reaction is to say, well, that's obviously not true. Just, I've had jobs for a long time, let's be honest, right? Everybody has some kind of slogan they attach to their culture, and we're a culture of such and such. We're all a family here, and all that kind of stuff. We all know that none of it's true, or it means something very different to one person than it does to another. So it's just one of those things where I came in and I'm a very open-minded person. I'm like, okay, cool, prove it. And then over time, it's just like, oh, okay, wow, wow, I would not have made that decision, but I can see why you did that. And you continue and continue and continue. Like, okay, cool. No, this actually is a real thing. I'm on board. Let's go after it. So it's something that it wasn't just an instant. It's something that has to be proven over time. And I think RainTech as a company and all of us as the owners, kind of prove that every day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So between the people period and then the guide values, I think both of those are examples of creating that sense of ownership that both of you guys are talking about. Andrew, when you think about creating a culture of ownership, how do you think about making it real for employees? And maybe you can give us some examples about how you bring this into the day-to-day for folks.
Oh, sure. Honestly, it's kind of a term I've started to push back on a little bit, like on LinkedIn. So there's so-called culture warriors, I guess, out there. I'm not one much for declaring combat or conflict necessarily in things where I think this is really just about evolution and things that are just happening and we can kind of go along with it or not. But they will tout ownership from strictly an accountability standpoint, and I don't I don't like that at all. That word should not be, I think, co-opted, especially by other owners who are like, oh, we really promote ownership and that people own accountability and responsibility, but they don't own any share of profits or the potential upsides and so forth. And so I'm a little bit leery currently just on the culture of ownership versus like what is actual employee ownership. For me, that absolutely equated to completely equal profit sharing, which is another thing that a lot of people hear and they're like, oh yes, you did what? And it's like, okay, well, like deep breaths, you can get through this, but there's so many existing models and paradigms that sort of dictate tenure and salary, and that's why I think honestly people who tend to be doing pretty well financially oftentimes do gravitate towards these because they're like, I'm probably going to do fine, whether I'm an owner who's exiting or I've been here forever or I make a bunch of money, then I'm going to end up with a bigger piece of the pie anyway. And so once again, we're inherently declaring the worth and value of one person over another. Now, that's not to say that everyone gets paid the same. Again, crucially, this is the thing to point out. Compensation is compensation. If Jefferson comes down the hall tomorrow and says, "Hey, I want to make another X number of dollars a year," well, like he gets to do that, just like he could do at any other company. That doesn't change at all, and that doesn't change bonuses or commission structures, other incentives. You can do anything that you want. Profit is what's left over after that, as far as I'm concerned, and what I sort of designed into this restructure. And if I had gone one of the more traditional routes, then basically myself, who was the majority shareholder, my brother, who was my minority partner, and one or two of our oldest employees would have gotten like all the benefit. And then it's like, well, what did we really do? Again, if we're trying to win a popularity contest, maybe, but still, we have a lot of people who have just come to work here in the last year or two who would look at that and go like, all right, I mean, I guess this is basically what everyone else does, right? Like you tend to front load or top load all of the benefit that basically everyone else is generating. And so for me, governance and financial benefit are what fall into ownership. It was part of the reason why I didn't, was a little bit less enamored with a co-op. And I mean, all employee ownership, I'm a big fan of, first of all. But we looked at ESOP initially because it was the one that everyone looks at. As soon as I realized that it's governed entirely as a retirement plan and that decisions have to be made for future retirees, even at the cost of current workers, it did not align with sort of a present moment awareness and existence that I aligned to. I mean, literally reorienting my entire job in this whole company around the notion of a future that, you know, obviously doesn't exist. That didn't really resonate. Neither did the guaranteed responsibility of the fiduciary, the trustee that has to deliver all legitimate offers to buy the company. It's like there's nothing that would ensure that this company would evaporate more quickly almost than moving to an ESOP model, because now there's somebody who has that fiduciary responsibility to deliver all legitimate offers to everybody. And so if it's not today, or it's not maybe while I'm here and I can, you know, hopefully keep people on board, then eventually some private equity group would just come in and talk enough people into selling, and that's what they would do. And that's not what I was interested in doing. And then on the co-op side, there was also a few more strings attached in terms, generally speaking, maybe sometimes of having to buy in, and then there's some ownership or membership type of thing that has to be sort of disposed of when you leave. And then I did like the democratization side of it. And then we started having conversations about like, is everyone voting on, you know, what flavor of tacos to have on Taco Tuesday, or like, is it, how democratized is that? And we kind of took a step back and said, like, look, we don't believe that we've got necessarily a leadership or a governance problem. But what we need is more participation from our people so that everyone is actually a part of it. And what was important to me was that I no longer had unilateral authority. And so the board has oversight over me. And of course, then we have elected members of both the board and the Trust Stewardship Committee, which I'm also on the Trust Stewardship Committee, but I don't have veto power there either. So I can be overruled by the other two members of that. And that was important to me because that's another part of this old paradigm that says, at the end of the day, if somebody wakes up and they're just, you know, super pissed off that day, or, you know, just want to make a bad decision, they get to just go in there and do that. And everyone else just, you know, has to deal with that and over and over and over again. And I said, I would much rather be the leader that everyone here agrees that they want for as long as they'll have me. And I've already told people that if the board came to me tomorrow and said like, hey, we want to make a change, it's like, you guys are the people that I put in charge of running all of this. You know this business better than I do now because you're doing it all day to day. Literally, if Jefferson and those other four board members said, we want to make a change, I'd be like, I have to trust you guys. Obviously, you know this business better than I do, collectively, for sure. So that was kind of another important part, is to make sure that from a governance standpoint, that there isn't this sort of sense of, you know, unilateral authoritarianism. And I like getting buy-in and feeling support from other people. And if they push back, then it's like, all right, let's figure, you know, something else out. So to me, ownership definitely has both pieces. There's a financial benefit part, which in my case, I insisted was equal for everyone. And there's a governance side, which in our case is a healthy balance, I think, of traditional regular leadership, but with mechanisms by which the employee base broadly can put people on the board who can obviously replace leadership, et cetera.
So let me ask, Andrew, that's obviously a step change in how decisions are made in the company with this new governance layer. Were there practices you guys had in place for transparency, employee input, and contribution to decision making, even if it wasn't yet encoded in the governance layer
It was
prior?
organic because we use EOS, and so we've got this sort of operating system that governs meetings and level 10s and quarterlies and annuals, and so there was a framework in place by which we intended everyone to participate. So everyone needs to be in at least one sort of level 10 or department level meeting or something, and that was the organic intention there, was to make sure that that feedback loop was closed, and so that everyone had a participatory relationship with at least having their voice heard. And that worked really well, frankly, because Jefferson will run his level 10 across his whole department and then come back to our COO and say, hey, this is what I'm hearing from the people. So yeah, I think that that worked really well. And that was not particularly hard because both myself and our COO are very wired toward being deferential. Like these are the people doing the work. They understand the work. They understand the clients. They understand what they're doing. If they say that they need something or they want to see something done differently, then this is the oracle truth. It's not us going down there saying, oh, we're going to go tell you how to do this, like a job that I did, a number of years ago. But it was a very different world back then. Everything was different. And so I'm a smart guy. I can help people figure out new solutions, but it would be really weird if I walked down there and told Jefferson to like do X, Y, or Z about anything. I think he would, I don't know, he'd probably be like, sure, but he might also be like, why would you, care all of a sudden or, want to insist on this thing? I'm more like, hey, do you have everything that you need from, the data and telemetry and everything to make the decisions with your department that you need to make? And to me, again, that's empowerment and really just trust and delegation, and also just an insistence that I don't want to carry the minutia of every decision that gets made around here, because I did that obviously many, many years ago, and it's taxing. It's a lot of work to take responsibility and accountability for every single decision. Now, I'm ultimately accountable for every decision, and I'm happy to do that. But I'm not responsive to actually making them, seeing them through, dealing with the fallout and consequences. So delegation and is just part of empowerment to me, which is sort of more part of just an easier way of being, I think, in the world. Really, is trusting people to do the things that you've delegated or asked them to do.
Yep. Yep. So while we're on operating and culture, you guys run a 32-hour work week. I want to hear both of your perspectives on this. Andrew, let's start with you, and then we'll move over to you on this, Jefferson. But Andrew, where did this idea come from? How did you roll it out? Tell us about that process.
Sure. Well, the first time I had heard of it, my brother, my partner, brought it up probably 8 or 10 years ago, and I think I laughed it off, frankly, because we didn't have enough people, I think, to cover the hours that we would need to be available for our customers. And I think my response was like, if you can get the customers to go to a 32-hour work week as well, then I'm all over that. And so obviously a number of years later, we have grown, and we do have a size team that actually can spread itself out and cover obviously all of our customer hours. And so to me, this was part of another, I think, false narrative that the world is dealing with right now around AI. And there's this seemingly binary choice between like, do we replace everyone with AI, or do we declare AI as useless and we're not going to touch it because we're afraid that it's going to replace everyone? And everyone's like in this sort of fraught situation trying to figure out like, it's here to get us all and it's going to take all of our jobs. And it's like, again, only because we have this prescription, this connection, attachment to an old paradigm that says, well, yeah, because Joe's got to make all the money, obviously. He's got to make as much as humanly possible. Clearly, we all understand that, right? Like, so you understand why you don't get to keep your job, because this guy's got to get a bigger boat when he retires. And people are like, yeah, I get it. And it's like, let's stop getting that. Let's stop seeing it that way and accepting it that way. And so as a technology company, I knew I had tons of people down there that could learn and figure out AI faster than your your average person, obviously. And so the key to that was saying, okay, look, here's the deal. Nobody here is going to lose their job to AI. Nobody. However, we might all lose our jobs to AI if we don't get out in front of it and be an AI leader in managed services and cybersecurity and all the areas that we play. And I have a lot of colleagues in this space who do not touch AI. They're more like, oh, we just, we don't think it's trustable or whatever. They kind of have the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that they're trying to project. But in reality, they're more just freaking out because they don't know how to make it do what it can do, and they don't know how that's going to change every part of their company. And so instead, I said, why don't we get good at it? And then we can go to a 32-hour work week. And here's your happy medium. The AI was not supposed to, serve just the shareholder. And that's basically the shortcut that I think all of the false narrative wraps around is that everyone's like, well, the shareholders, they got to get, and it's like every other piece of technology that's come down the pike in the decades since I started my career. We're there to support users, workers, at our customers. It was there to make their jobs easier, their lives a bit, less painstaking. And yet we just glossed over all of that entirely. And it's like we've got, this isn't a problem. There's really a solution here, but it just sits in the middle. If we can start to reframe what we're expecting to get out of AI. So
Hmm.
for me, that was a kind of a no-brainer. And I'll let Jefferson speak to whether or not the 32-hour work week remains a popular characteristic of working at RainTech or not.
Jump
Yeah,
in, Jefferson. Yeah, we'd love to hear your perspective.
yeah, it's actually kind of funny. IT companies are probably notorious for two things, I guess. One of which is benefits, and the other is weird layoffs. So it's not weird to hear that we have benefits and that they're nice. But a 32-hour work week is super unique. I've never gone to any company where I've had a 32-hour work week. I personally was like, oh, well, this is impossible. There's no real benefit to this to the company. That was the part that was very challenging for me to see ahead of time. On one side, kind of have to admit there is a legitimate logistical challenge that we had to overcome to be able to enact a 32-hour work week. But once we overcame that challenge, we find that people are more rested, people are happy, people are excited to be here. I've got a one-on-one with each of my team members each month, and we talk through all these things and how's it going, and goals and objectives and growth and all that stuff. And the morale since going to the 32-hour work week is just consistently higher and higher and higher. And even when stuff is hard, because sometimes work is hard and sometimes it's super, super hard. Sometimes personal life is super hard. Um, there's almost like a floor below people because like, wow, that was a tough week, but hey, I got Friday off, so this is great. Now I'm going to go relax and it'll be all right. It's just a lot better for people. It allows them to take care of themselves, have more time for themselves, which just makes them show up way better for all of our customers. So when you take care of your employees take care of your customers, and the further that goes, the deeper that goes into the company, the better it gets. So, kind of to Andrew's point, we really did have to leverage AI very heavily to kind of gain some of these efficiency benefits that were required to pull this off. One of the things you learn pretty quickly here is there's a whole bunch of different skill sets in operation at a help desk or a service desk, however you want to describe it. And admin work is usually not a skill set of technicians. You may have a Venn diagram and there may be a sliver in the middle, but it's not most of them. It's a few of them. And it's also where technicians tend to be least efficient, most challenged, and it's just kind of exhausting. It's like outside of your skill set. So by taking a lot of the admin work that they had to do and using AI for that, building different agents that could handle scheduling, that could handle simple follow-ups, categorization and triaging. It's all the kind of stuff that no tech person wants to do, but has to be done. Eliminating a lot of that stuff by using AI to increase that efficiency, it actually drove a huge number of free hours that we could then give back to the employees. And once you're doing that, it kind of becomes a self-sustaining cycle. Now we're looking for all of these things like, oh, well, where else can we eliminate hours so we can give those back? Where else can we eliminate hours so we can have them take another class so they can upskill, so they can do new things, so they can be creative? Tired people aren't very creative. I don't know if you've noticed that. Exhausted people really can't go the extra mile because they're already tapped out. So by going to the 32-hour work week, leveraging AI to kind of drive that efficiency, it's really just actually improved our performance across the board. Huge, huge improvement. So I've seen that personally.
So if I'm getting this right, in moving to the 32-hour work week and pairing that with working with your team to implement AI, you guys both saw boost in morale and it sounds like you're saying an increase in performance and quality for your customers.
Oh, absolutely. When you're not stressed out about rushing on to the next thing, you can take more time, think more clearly, and do a much better job. Fewer band-aids, fewer shortcuts, and just get it fixed properly. Um, Taking the admin hours out of the day gave all that time back to the technicians, and suddenly you end up with much, much better work.
Hmm.
Rushed people just don't do
Hmm.
as great of a job, and it's because you don't have any time.
Hmm. So, a lot of what I'm hearing from you guys is you had a lot of practices and culture in place prior to actually transitioning to employee ownership. So, in some senses, it sounds like kind of a natural extension of what you guys were already doing. Um, Andrew, tell us what made now the right time for you to transition to employee ownership. If you already had a lot of this culture in place, what was the like nudge to take the dive?
You know, I think I don't remember if there was a particular instant or moment, but I do remember that there was one of our weekly leadership meetings, and and I brought it up again. And this was heading into our corporate retreat, which is where I would end up announcing it. And I said, if this can be done, then I'm committing now to doing it now. And in terms of why, everyone's on a path, obviously, and whether they realize it or not, or when they figure it out, is obviously up to every individual. And I found myself on a path and started to get a clearer picture of what that meant, and maybe how the life that I had sort of carved out and manifested and been in relationship with had maybe not been as in alignment with what I realized I really wanted to be. And a lot of people end up finding these things mutually exclusive, and they say, "Well, I can't do this anymore because in this life I'm expected to do this, and in this other one I wear this other mask, and then over here it's something different." And I kind of went through a period of that as well, where I thought, "There's no way that I can reshape, business, to fit my new understanding of the way things are." And but lo and behold, when I sort of let go of that, fear around, or belief that I couldn't do that, then it did start to happen with these cultural things that kept coming up. And so this last piece was actually the oldest decision that was still in place, if you want to call it that, in my whole life. It was literally the oldest decision that still had ramifications today in sort of a contractualized way. And so I just knew that I needed to go back and readdress what had been a decision I made when I was 22. So rather unconsciously, sitting across the desk from an accountant who said, "What kind of company are you going to start?" And check a box. I thought, I don't know, like,
Yeah.
what are the
Yeah.
options, And so, and that was literally how, I ended up in the path that I was on. And so this was really more of a course correction. And like I always say, I could have waited until I retired. And if Jefferson would have been so good as to stay here until then, which is not a guarantee, then sure, then he probably would have also been appreciative of that. But at the same time, he and I would have had to go all these years between now and whenever I retire with this implicit, unspoken understanding that I am still somehow worth more, and that the excess value that he and his team create doing all of the actual hard work here is still mine and ought to be mine, is rightfully mine, because I worked in a garage 25 years ago for like a year and a half, maybe, or something like that. And I think
Hmm.
that founders are getting just way too much credit, frankly, and keep it and
Mm.
hoard it and identify as it. And then ultimately retire on it. I get it, but it's just not a way that was aligned for me anymore. So the why now was basically, it was a culmination of things. It was alignment coming into play, along with the fact that, we had to look at the actual feasibility, like could we do this cash flow wise? So, my brother and I carry a note, and it's the longest term that we could choose at the lowest interest rate that we could allow for, legally speaking, so that we could do this transaction. This was not us trying to take chips off the table and see what we could get out of early. It was like, no, we need this to be as doable for the company as possible, and that's how the whole transaction was crafted. And
Hmm.
so it was a
Hmm.
combination of alignment coming into play along with our size and cash flow starting to support us doing that transaction, and doing it all immediately was the other thing. Obviously, people can do this in so many different ways. That's the best part of an EOT, as far as I can tell. It's just it is infinitely flexible. I can't think of any one thing ever one time that I asked your team that, like, hey, can we do this, or what about that, or whatever, that it wasn't like however you want it to look. It'll just be whatever you say it is. And it was like, oh, that's great. And so it was such an easy process to get through, because I literally just had to show up like this, on these weekly meetings and work with these brilliant people who understand the mechanics of all of the trust legal stuff and the financial side and all of that. And that's great, because honestly, I'm a lot less interested, frankly, in the mechanics of this. So when I get invited to speak in these types of forums, I've done it online and in person now, and I'm talking to a lot more people. I do just like to, kind of remind them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we love to nerd out about the mechanics, definitely. Um,
Exactly. That's your job. That's your lane.
yeah, exactly. Okay, so Andrew, you were thinking about this for quite some time. Jefferson, I imagine you probably were not thinking about employee ownership for many, many years. Tell us about the first time you heard that RainTech was going to transition to employee ownership.
Yeah, I heard that we were going to transition to employee ownership. It was kind of a, hey, here's what we're thinking. Hey, we might actually do this. And I'm like, I'm not even sure what that means. How does that actually work? I mean, let's be honest. What's the benefit to me? Like, does that actually matter to me? You hear all kinds of stuff that a company is doing, and so oftentimes, like, that's a really lovely initiative for somebody that it affects. Cool, I guess, right? There's so much stuff like that in business. So I really just didn't understand the exact mechanics, the exact implications. The further down the line we went, it became evident that it's like, oh, there's a legitimate benefit to myself and all of my coworkers, um, and I would say, a lot of responsibility that comes with it. You're not just, some folks like to kind of clock in, clock out, and be done with it. It's there is more that's just required of you. You got to give it your best, because you're giving it your best for all of your coworkers, for all of your partners. So initially, I really I wasn't sure how to take it. Like I said, I'm open. I'm willing to consider anything. I just didn't think a ton about it, and I'd never considered
Yeah.
it before RainTech. I'd heard of people doing ESOPs and an employee-owned company. I'm like, what does that even actually mean? And in practice, it's very, very cool. So yeah,
So
it didn't even register before.
were there, yeah, were there any like misconceptions, concerns? Like, how did the rest of the employees take it?
Well, let's be honest, most people haven't been in this kind of position. So they had
Yeah.
no idea what to think of it. What even is this? What is the benefit? Why do I actually care? As we dug into it some more, people started to see, oh, this is what it actually means, and this is great for everybody. So it's kind of foreign to a lot of people. And up until, frankly, even after the decision was made, the ink was dry, all that, people didn't fully get it. It's just different. So a lot of people don't really know what they're getting into, and it's great.
Hmm.
That's kind of typical. I get a lot of questions too, a lot of people who are kind of puzzled, for all these things that we're talking about too, because there's almost like a waiting for the other shoe to drop, or like, what's the angle? What's the catch? That's what people basically want to know. When I announced this at our corporate retreat, I got out in front of everyone at this big long dinner table, and I said, by show of hands, who all here wakes up super excited to make sure my brother and I are extra comfortable when we retire? And it was like literally like, it was awkward. It was wonderful. It was delightful, because people just didn't know what to do with that. And I like that. I'm really about making what has been implicit for far too long more explicit so that people can ask more questions. So to Jefferson's point, somebody told me a few months ago that after that was announced, he was like, sure, I'm guess, in some 3 to 5 year time horizon or whatever, like, eventually this might be a thing or something. I don't know. And to Jefferson's point, like, who even knows what it means? And I don't think anyone knew that, like, by the time I announced it because it was hell or high water. I was going to get this done, whatever it was going to look like. We didn't even have the vehicle picked out. I was just like, I am not going to be stopped from doing this. I have the wherewithal. I've got the support of my brother and partner. And so I feel like I've got the authority that I need to go and do this, and counted on the support, obviously, that I got from our team, who was highly supportive of doing it. And then obviously we had to find somebody that could actually do all of that magic to make it happen, because otherwise we got to just show up and talk about, interesting governance strategies and little what ifs. But the notion of having your company owned by a perpetual purpose trust is what ultimately just sealed the deal for me, because people do come and go, and that's part of the human experience, that's part of the path. But ideas and concepts are things that last, and they're things that we invest our energy into. And it's actually why we have the paradigms that do exist today that are not very well aligned, and that even though they actually don't work for very many people optimally, everyone sort of accepts them. And so this was a vehicle that allowed me to convert whatever it is that I had built into a durable idea and a concept that can actually last forever and ever. And so the trust itself doesn't mention technology, as you might imagine. It doesn't mention that we do anything with computers or AI or cybersecurity or compliance or anything, because it has nothing to do with the purpose. The purpose is to recognize, declare, and perpetuate the infinite intrinsic worth and value of every human being on the planet, period. And it starts with whatever assets, or in this case, a company that this trust happens to own. And so the people here at RainTech are the very first ones that are the beneficiaries of that purpose. And when I realized that there could be something that would last. And so unlike when you sell to private equity and whatever you built evaporates and there's a strip and flip and people get fired and customers get upset, like we've seen it over and over and over in our business. It happens all the time. I've probably gotten 3 legitimate capital investment private equity emails since we've been on this call, and that's not a joke. I get them constantly, and they make a mess of things. And so knowing that that's not necessarily doesn't have to be the case, and we can start asking questions like, where's the excess value going? And if somebody pulls up in a Maserati and then lays off, X percentage of the workforce or something, like we need to start asking, I think, tougher questions, frankly, that are not very tough for workers and regular people to answer. But I think that leaders need to start answering and even asking themselves these tough questions, like what on earth makes you think that you are worth so much more than the people, by the way, who do real work, like actual work. And I'm not saying that executives don't work, and I'm not saying that there isn't decisions to be made, but that's just a role. You're here for the same amount of time as everybody else. So, why are you taking all of this excess benefit?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, about making it
So
explicit.
let me ask about there's obviously the structural side on the economics and the governance. Jefferson, I'm interested to hear from you. How did you see your team react to this? Where did you see ownership show up in a kind of a more tangible way? Did people take on more responsibility? Was there no change at all? Like, what did you see from your team?
Yeah. I kind of have it. We've got an agreeable team to begin with. People want to help out. They want to help their coworkers as much as they want to help the customers. But you see people more invested in doing um, extra things. They're like, oh, well, I can see how this would benefit our clients long term. I'm interested in taking that project on. I'm interested in getting that certificate. I'm interested in learning. Learning is one of the biggest things. That's one of the things we've been trying to um, infuse into our culture completely, is that we want to keep learning and growing. And as you can imagine, that's been central to doing what we've done with AI thus far, because it's so much in its infancy right now. But people are more excited to learn something that benefits the company and themselves and has a long-term implication. That's always been one of the difficult things is when you ask somebody to build something that benefits the company. They're like, well, why would I build that? It's not on my job description, man. It's not, how does that benefit me? Why would I bother? Well, there's no reason to, unless you're going to fire me. Like, why would I? And, that's not to say people are lazy. It's just, when it's transactional on both sides. So I kind of just leave it at that.
Hmm. Hmm.
I
Andrew,
love
looks like you want to
it.
jump in.
I was just going to say that. I mean, sort of this whole everything we've been describing here, again, is also more solutions to real world problems. On the other side of the AI dilemma is AI adoption. And again, because you insist on laying people off and attempting to force them to train the robots that are going to take their jobs, it's just like it's silly. It's frankly funny to sit back and watching Wall Street, just like all these massive, billions, borderline trillions of dollars moving around in data center and AI, and then laying off tens of thousands of people and trying to say that it was because of AI, when in reality, it's like you look under the hood and it definitely wasn't. And again, meanwhile, what you need to make AI work is you need humans who understand what the AI is supposed to be doing. And if you look at AI as a human amplifier and not a human replacement, then everything that Jefferson just said explains why I've got, almost 30 highly motivated, innovative people who are ready to solve long-term problems and invest in what makes this company more valuable. And it's like, our competitor down the street that's the same size, they can't squeeze a fraction of that kind of innovation out of their team because they're already squeezing everything that they can. And so it's really about just creating a different dynamic where people
Hmm.
want to engage with innovative ideas. And again, AI adoption itself is just a perfect example of how there's one way to do it where it just fails. It's a faceplant every time because for obvious reasons. And the CFO is like, I don't understand why it didn't work, and it's like, well, because you don't understand AI and you probably understand people even less.
Hmm. Hmm. I think that's exactly right. I want to ask one more questions about the transition before shifting into questions from the audience. But we talked a bit about obviously what this meant for you, Andrew, what it meant for the employees. I talk to business owners all the time who are exploring employee ownership. And one of the questions I actually get is, how do customers react? Did you guys talk to your clients about this? Do they know about this, or is this just an internal initiative for you guys?
I'll defer to Jefferson. He has a lot more customer interaction these days than I do. I've talked to one or two about it, but Jefferson, I don't know. What do the customers say?
Yeah, of course, one of the initial concerns immediately was, oh gosh, what happens if I need help on Friday? Are you guys all gone?
Oh,
Um, which
are you talking 32-hour work week, Zoe, or employee ownership?
Oh, yeah, I'm talking about the employee ownership
Oh, I'm
component.
so sorry. I'm
Okay.
so
Yeah,
sorry. I
yeah,
got
no
mixed up
worries.
with two things right there. As far as employee ownership, I don't know that it's come up a whole bunch with our customers. I know some of them already are employee owned. Some of them are considering
Hmm.
employee ownership. So I don't think it's actually that foreign to the executives or our point of contacts, the people that we work directly with at a high level at these customers. It's completely foreign for a lot of the employees, but it doesn't come up a huge amount in calls as we're doing stuff.
Hmm.
It's just kind of a weird thing.
I've had a few conversations with prospects, and I will say that there is a hugely competitive aspect of it for us in at least our industry, and that's because of all the roll-ups going on. Like virtually anyone that's been in business for some period of time has worked with a managed service provider or an IT company like us, and has seen them get siphoned up by private equity, has seen all the good people get laid off to push all those multiples higher, and then customers end up with terrible service. And so like we've seen this like over and over and over again. And when I can tell a prospect that we are insulated from that because our trust agreement has explicitly a poison pill that says that if this company is ever sold, after debts are satisfied, all proceeds have to go to a nonprofit. And so nobody that works here can benefit from it financially. And so people who have had that experience and seen companies get bought up and now it's all this turnover and all this stuff go like, wait a minute, you'll never be sold. Yep, never be sold. I mean, unless we literally have to sell for solvency to, we're bankrupt, et cetera. I mean, I'm not saying that business doesn't happen, but outside of that, no, there's no mechanism by which this company actually really can be sold, at least not without all the proceeds going to nonprofit.
So it's almost like a guarantee on that continuity of quality for your
That's right.
clients.
And when you call RainTech, you're always talking to an owner. So it's like
Hmm.
all these things combined are like, so you guys aren't going to sell. You're going to have people there a lot longer. There's going to be more consistent service. And so, yeah, I think they start to see that as a much safer bet than going with sort of the MSP roll up du jour that's like, oh, well, this is the
Hmm.
steamroller that's coming through town right now. I guess we'll be on board with them for a while. And then, you end up
Yeah.
leaving.
Yeah. All right, so I have a final question for each of you, and then we'll answer a couple questions from the audience. Andrew, for you, I want to talk about lessons learned for the owners who are on the call considering this pathway, considering employee ownership. Where would you encourage them to get started?
Honestly, I think it starts with values. That's what I've been telling people. You really have to start at the beginning, which is right in the middle of yourself, and figure out what it is that resonates, what sort of legacy. I'm not a big fan of the word per se. It's got a lot of, attachments outside of time and stuff, but still, like, what is it that you're building? What is it that you're going to leave behind? And is it going to benefit anyone but yourself, frankly? And I mean, I think we've all been playing a really small game, basically. Like we're all just competing against each other, and it's just like, it's time to grow up a little bit, I think, and just say like, look, is everything that you've anticipated in your retirement, strictly like what you need to survive. I'm going to go another step further though and say that while I had some employees even turned coworkers ask me like, hey, what, doesn't this mean that you sold this company at a lower valuation? And I say, yes, absolutely. And it was a fair valuation. It was an actually well done, just market driven valuation, not driven by what private equity would have paid. They would have paid a premium because they're buying everybody they can now. And so there are some things happening and things developing that even though no one would believe or imagine that I could somehow end up, maybe still the same or better than what I would have had I not sold it, they are actually developing now. And, while that requires as much as like 25 to 30 times, whatever it was it would have been before, there are some gigantic potentials that have actually started to unlock that I'm super excited about in my below the lid will
Hmm.
off the top of it all together. But there's some things in development, so we need to see kind of how that's going to go. But anyway, that's what I would recommend is that people just, do a values check and really say, what does alignment mean to you? What does worth and value of a human being mean to you? And look around and like who's doing the hard work, who's probably staying up at night. Now, if you're still the one staying up at night, then I think that there's other alternatives still available to, everyone, frankly, that deals with a little bit more stress than they need in their lives. That goes for everyone, but still, I assure all owners that the people that are doing the work are working very hard and dealing with stress and
Hmm.
pressure in ways that they may not even see. And it's time to start recognizing and valuing that work and that effort.
Nice. So Jefferson, maybe a different side of the coin there. In this transition to employee ownership, what made ownership feel real to you as an employee ownership and your other employee owners rather than just something that was on a piece of paper?
Yeah. To some degree, the thing that shifted my mindset was recognizing that there is a compensation in the profit sharing. Um, for a lot of folks, it isn't about the money, but money does matter. And to some degree, as Andrew alluded to earlier, that compensation is a recognition. And it's historically a recognition of, let's call it risk, let's call it skill, let's call it tenure, salary, whatever. When you take the profit and you share it equally with the employees recognize, whoa, my work directly affects me instead of it just going into some nebulous bucket. That means when I do an exceptional job, everyone benefits. Like my coworkers are dependent upon me in a way they weren't before. Andrew was dependent upon me in a way that he wasn't before, and I'm dependent upon him in a way I was before. Before was purely transactional. Now it's, oh, we actually are all working on this together, and we all sink or swim together. So suddenly the way we work with other teams has to change. The way we work with each other changes. The way we interact with leadership changes. Because when something happens, we are all in a lot of ways equally affected. So we all have a genuine concern that things work well. That doesn't mean like you're meddling in everything, but people care now in a way that you really couldn't command before, if that makes sense. So that
Beautifully
really
put.
changed the whole perspective.
Love it. Okay, that's also a good tee up to a question we have from the audience member. Andrew, so one of the folks here is curious about the relationship between the loan repayment for the seller financing and the profit sharing. Walk us through what that looks like.
So we were advised that we had to have a some sort of a minimum level of terms with this because the IRS would otherwise frown upon it. And like I said, we just said that we wanted to be as favorable as possible to the company. And the consultants that we worked with at Common Trust are the ones who did the math and said, yes, you can. And we have two other partners that are also in the process of being bought out that predated all of this. They had left earlier. And so they factored in all of that, the other two being bought out, and then myself and my brother also being bought out. And they said, and we think, along even a conservative baseline estimate that you'll still be able to do profit sharing in the first year, which we're going to find out, I guess, here in probably 3 or 4 months or something when all that gets calculated. I don't think that anyone was fully expecting that. I mean, certainly not me or the other I have a hard time even calling us leaders, honestly. I'm getting more and more even away from that. I mean, I'm looking at Jefferson and I'm like, I figure he's a leader too, but it's like, I don't know that I'm doing anything here that everyone else here isn't also doing, which is just showing up every day and figuring out what needs to be done to move this thing forward. So, but anyway, those of us who were lucky enough to help, try to put all this together, they did the math and said this is going to work. And we were like, well, I mean, even if it didn't for the first, year or two, we would hope that everyone would, hang in there because we have to sort of get over this hump to get the cash flow re-recognized. But so far, everything still seems to be on track, just as you guys said.
Mhm. So just to make it explicit, you guys were able to structure the loan such that employees would also get profit sharing early on. So it makes
Yeah.
it really tangible early on for employees.
Yes, exactly. And that was kind of a key to me was like, if that doesn't happen for 10 years, then that's, we're not really getting to the point where, I really wanted us to get. So unfortunately, we were able to do that. And I want to be clear. I want people to understand that we were not wildly successfully profitable before. Like we were not printing money. We were not overcharging our clients. We were not, I mean, we were profitable and fortunately just profitable enough to account for this whole transaction. But you don't have to be printing money in order to do this.
Great. Well, we are hitting the hour, so I'm going to wrap us up here. But Andrew, Jefferson, thank you both for joining us today and sharing your perspectives. This is the first time we've also had an employee owner on alongside CEO and people person. Also, the first time we've had a people person on as their title. But thank you guys for sharing your perspective. It's just so valuable for other business owners to hear from folks who are walking the walk. And for folks who are on the call, if you're interested in employee ownership, we're happy to have a conversation with you at Common Trust.